Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists and dear spectators. We are starting the second day of our conference, the days after, which is dedicated to the legacy of two plays written by the Czech writer, journalist, and playwright Karel Čapek, The White Plague and RUR. Yesterday, we went through the first chapter of the conference, which was a reflection of historical interpretations of these two plays in former Czechoslovakia or abroad. And in the last part of yesterday's program, we've started the chapter now, which is dedicated to current stagings of these two plays, which will be discussed in this morning panel. Yesterday, we spoke more about some references to the topics discussed in these two plays by Karel Čapek, and we touched a bit also current political and social situation. So I hope it was some food for thoughts for the evening individual program of all who participated yesterday in the conference. And today we will see how these topics or if these topics are reflected also in the productions we will discuss today. Today, we will switch between Czech and English, as many of the Czech participants will speak in their mother tongue. So I would like to ask all the international guests to use the interpretation button in your Zoom application and choose English for interpretation. Here is a short instruction how to do it. You can see it on your screens. And we will start with our program. I would just like to announce that again today I will be your guide and moderator during the conference together with my colleague Hasan Zahirovic, from the who is representing one of the conference partners, or two of the conference partners, the Silesian University and the Čapek Brothers Society. And the last part of the conference will be moderated by Markéta Fantová, the artistic director of the Prague Quadrennial of Performance Design and Space. So now I will switch into Czech a přivítám tady našeho prvního mluvčího, který nám představí velice speciální projekt, který vzniká v pražském Švandově divadle a který je věnován umělé inteligenci. Na toto téma jsme včera taky narazili. Je to tak, že premiéra tohoto divadelního projektu se měla konat už v lednu, ale dozvíme se důvody, proč byla odložena. A také je to tak, že jsme původně měli mít dva. Máme pouze pana Rudolfa Rosu z ústavu, a doufám, že to řeknu správně, formální a aplikované lingvistiky Matematicko-fyzikální fakulty Univerzity Karlovy.
From Charles University,
a ze záznamu k nám promluví také dramaturg Švandova divadla David Košťák, který momentálně je na zkoušce a nemůže být s námi online, ale připravil si svůj příspěvek, takže ho pro nás nahrál a
sitting an exam. That's why he cannot be here with us, but he actually prepared the video. Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Rudolf Rossa, who will introduce their project. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is, as has been said, we are working on a project with the name Theatre. And this project focuses on actually making plays supported by AI. Today, we are working on an AI when a robot writes a play, which we wanted to introduce on the anniversary of the 100 years of CHAPEX RUR. Unfortunately, we didn't manage, but we'll have the online premiere of our play in February. The whole idea originates from Tomáš Studeník, an innovator who noticed some time ago that there will be this anniversary, which is very important for us Czechs. And he actually thought that it would be very suitable to celebrate this anniversary by staging a play. And he was thinking that RUR was play, the first of its kind that introduced the idea of a robot. And we actually thought, or he rather thought, that he would reverse the tables and he would actually introduce a play written by a robot. And then we cooperated with the Schwanda Theatre and came up with a project when AI writes a script for a theatre play. Next month, this will premiere, and the script has got roughly 30 pages, and we managed to put the human intervention to the minimum. That means that most of the lines have been generated by AI. What did the people do? The people had to actually program the robot, and David Kościak, who also worked on the script, defined the inputs for the software, which then generated the script. The human interventions applied to actually rearranging the lines. We also saw some advantages when working with AI. The dramaturge could decide what to strike out, and as a result, the system, the software, came up with a new version, with a new alternative. And that means we have 8 scenic ideas, and that was the basis for the play. I actually ran the team at the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics, and that is what I could describe now, and then I will also utter a few words about the script. David will be how much did the people do and how much did the robot did? 10% accounts for people's intervention. It is difficult to describe. Now we have a software that generates line by line, but of course there are many limits, and we need a rather hierarchical order for this script generation, and that is why it is more difficult for a dramaturge, a director, an actor, and the same applies to the viewers, of course. Does it mean that the Chapek's worry that a robot could replace a human being is not true? Well, I would say the importance of a robot and person is about cooperation. We believe that the future lies in cooperation of AI and a human being. What I know is that you originally wanted to write about Chapek's plays originally, but then you focused on RUR. I have heard that you wanted to also cast Karel Čapek in a play. We were thinking about it, but finally we did not do that. The Shvanda Theatre decided about a common framework of the play. There was an idea originally that a robot would actually wind up in a typical situation for a human being, but then they ditched the idea. But of course, we are speaking about a possible concept which we could come up with. However, the robot does not know much about the personality of Karel Čapek because they don't know, and that's why we could not guarantee that it would actually be good. The person Karel Čapek is we can see him in other theaters actually, because they have got some performances about him, about this personality. There is also a puppet play by Olga Scheinflugová, which features Čapek. And there is another theater that actually would do this. Also, the Shvanda Theatre has got Shane Flugova's play where Čapek used to actually visit. It is true. The Shvanda Theatre embraced the project with enthusiasm because they actually could feel the link to Čapek's life. Well, let me describe the technical side of it. We have GPT-2 language software from a consortium, and it is a very popular software which is used very often. And this software has actually monitored or read through millions of texts from the internet, and part of it are also articles, newspaper articles. That means you, as a result, won't know whether it is a regular news article or whether it's been generated by AI. For our purposes, we had to edit the texts, and the software actually can generate replies to what a person first says. And of course, there is some sequencing of words involved. And let's say at the beginning, when we define or describe a set, and describe characters, persons, and the system, the software actually derives the next action from it. I have already mentioned that the software generates it line by line, but the software can also use a repository of 500 words. It works in English, the software. However, we have it in Czech. That means our play is in Czech. And that is why we had to use software translator to translate it from English into Czech. I'll try to share my screen. This is the name of the project, the name of the play, and where you can see it, where it is staged. And you might be interested in how or what it looks like, the script that has been computer generated or AI generated. I've got two examples which we did not use, to be honest. We generated more alternative scripts and we did not use this, but we still have it. So this is the first example. And it is from RUR, as you see. You see the input, and that is a text by Karel Čapek himself. And I had to edit it, I had to make it shorter. It's towards the end when people have been nearly extinguished, and we actually inserted the input into AI, and then AI generated the output. And then we selected from alternatives offered by the software. And here we selected this reply, as you see. You might take a minute to read it. We have selected this example intentionally. As you see, it looks quite nice. The software is pretty advanced. And let me show you the other example. And now I will test you, if I may, considering the limits of an interaction in Zoom, but you might use a chat room as well. So as you see, we have an input on the left-hand side from a play by Josef Doležal titled Claudia. Most of you might not heard of it. That's why it will be more difficult for you to find out what has been computer generated. Here you see continuation A and continuation B, and one of the continuations has been generated, computer generated, and one not. So please read through those continuations and try to guess which one has been AI generated. So if you manage to communicate with me to vote somehow use the chat. You may read through it for a while.
Tak koukám, že účastníci píšou, že do chatu psát nemůžou, ale...
Well, somebody has been writing to me that they cannot use the chat room, but we see the Q&A. Some chose A, some chose B. 2 in favor of A continuation. B is also favored by someone. You still have some time. You might still think about it.
Tak stále platí, že je to poměrně vyrovnané, tak ať
The results are tied. In this very example, you see an AI-generated text without any interference by us. And I have to say that continuation A has been AI-generated. Continuation B is text written by the author. However, it might be more difficult for you to guess because there are no stage directions, but you also can see that AI responded to the name Christian. Christian was a person's name, and AI started developing some concepts on Christianity. You see the text is a bit peculiar, and it might have actually made you puzzled. That is all on my part. I would also like to invite you to the premiere of the play, which will take place in a month. And now I'll give the floor to my colleague, which is videoed contribution. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the sound yet. Hello, I am David Kostiak, the dramaturge of Švandovo Theatre, which has a project focusing on AI with the name When a Robot Writes a Play. We actually used a special enter switch to actually initiate dialogues. We had a very simple interface where we actually inserted the first stage direction, we described the situation, the environment, and the computer started to generate further lines. It is, of course, different to work with AI than to work with a living person, because once you refuse some line, the computer starts generating from the very beginning. A dramaturge has got the possibility to mark a place or the spot which should be changed, and the computer starts generating from the beginning. The difference when working with a computer lies in working with somebody who is more obedient than a person. However, the disadvantage is once we actually refuse something, the computer also cancels what already developed, whereas when we work with a living person, people actually strive to change things before ditching the project altogether. The software can generate individual dialogues, not situations. Why is that? The software itself is based on literary illusions which encompass words described in some situations, but it won't factor the current situation on stage. And a software does not know that characters can say something that might be different from what they are thinking of. That actually makes a computer similar to children's minds, which are sort of more pristine, more simple. This text, which we actually generated, titled "When a Robot Writes a Play," actually was generated for some time. We tried to use connecting motifs. We had character, a robot character, and then we tried to make it more interesting in selecting situations that the robot had to confront. However, a robot cannot actually generate the whole play for the whole evening. That means that we had to create the script ourselves in selecting AI-generated dialogues and putting them together. The aim was to actually develop a life path of a robot who does not know much about his or her environment and who does not know much about his place in society. How could we use such a software in the future? We know that the software is far from being ideal, and the software had to learn how to generate dialogues based on scripts which had to read. We now have students led by Maria Novakova, who tried to show and describe texts describing situations and environments, and this is the machine learning experience for the software. How could we use such software in the future? Well, I do not think that AI will be able to replace creative author, or I cannot rather imagine that authors would use AI. Of course, there are authors who would write rather for the quantity than for the quality of the play, but authors are also vain. And since I'm an author, I cannot imagine that I would write something using AI and admitting it to the audiences. And there is also another aspect. The computer cannot work with emotions much. It works rather in an analytical way, but that is not all of the picture. However, in terms of shows of a number of episodes running over several seasons, that could be actually useful. That is all I wanted to share with you, and if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them. Okay, we have heard David Kościak. The questions will be asked in the Q&A, and Mr. Rossa will be here, and he will be able to say anything you will be asking him. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Marek Bečka, the founder of an independent theater company, and also a Cakes and Puppets company. You have actually selected also RUR. Let's speak about how you approached the text. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for handing over to me. First of all, I would like to introduce our theater company very briefly. Maybe you are not familiar with it. You mentioned that we are the best ones, we're the only ones who are independent. You put it in an excellent way. Thank you for this introduction. We have had this puppet the company for 30 years. And as a result of that, one defining element of our work over these 30 years has been that we combine texts, we include many references, we like to be playful and have fun. This is what we really do focus on. And as a result of that, it would be very challenging and not very typical of us to transform literary text, which usually adapt plays such as The Mysterious Stranger Gilgamesh or The Count of Monte Cristo. Also, we adapted pieces of Mr. Klima, who had many bloody stories, and many philosophical ideas were also included in such works. We adapt movies as well, such as Rocky, Psycho, or Jaws. And the reason why we decided to work with RUR was the merit of Mr. Jerzy Gedeček, the chairman of the Czech Pen Club. And it was actually about last year, in the beginning of this year at Archa, we planned a conference for several days on this topic. And when he approached us, we were a little bit surprised because we really choose what we want and we are very flexible about working with the text. But in this particular case, we were very happy to accept this offer because we thought we are really familiar with Čapek's play. We read it, and actually, we have adopted a certain principle of collective directing at our theater company. We all participate in all of the processes of literary adaptation, literary work, and it's always someone who accepts the overall responsibility. So it was my colleague, and I was the dramaturge. When I read the play, I was horrified because I thought it's outdated, unplayable. So that was my first thought. And now I would like to make a reference to what our colleagues said yesterday about the translation of this play. We heard about some excellent examples, how difficult it is to translate such a play. Well, I think that as far as Čapek's play is concerned, I'm not a politician, I'm not a practitioner. Maybe I will say something really horrible. But I think that Čapek's reputation is, among other things, well, of course, it's based on qualities as an author, but I mean the play, RUR, per se, I think the reputation is based on the translation into English, which is different from the Czech original. And I believe that it actually helped the play. It didn't harm it. It was easier to stage it even 100 years ago. We based our work on the Czech version, though, as it was said yesterday. It was said that it's a bad play. I don't think that. I don't share this opinion. But it was written in a strange way. At the beginning, it's not very serious, but then it turns the topic into a serious one. But what we decided to do was to focus on the general questions, more general questions. For example, the depersonalization of human work or artificial intelligence. This is something that has been touched on today already. So we took the text, and it was an excuse for us to have a joyful experience, to play with the nostalgia and also a certain naivety of Čapek's play, as well as stereotypes which are included in the play. I will give you two examples. One example is that in the play, there's a serious assumption that those businessmen or factory directors, they fall in love with a young lady that comes to the island. And the assumption is that she will marry one of them and the others will admire her and serve her faithfully. And nobody thinks that it's a strange thing to do. I guess Čapek was naive in this respect, and his personal life shows that. It was like this in his life. And you can, condemn me, you can criticize me for saying nonsense, but this is what I really believe. This idealism in the relationship between men and women is present in this story. And the second example is linked to that. In one moment, Helena asks, she asks, why are female robots being produced? And he says, well, there's a need for that. People are used to female secretaries. Well, the first thing that happened when information was being published on almost perfect copies of humans The first industry that responded was the sex industry. So there were speculations as to how such female robots could be used. Actually, Chapek did not work with this idea at all. We worked with that idea because we were really interested in that. And in a moment, I will try to show you on a video. I don't know how it will work, but at least I will try. I will show you some examples how we worked with that. When we started staging this play with scenographer, stage designer Bara Chehova, we decided to design some robots. I will show you some examples. They look like this. This is a male robot and a female robot. We did not use the size of robots. We used larger robots. Bara produced several of them. We used with perspectives, different sizes of puppets. And these new things, newly produced things, were combined with marionettes and puppets that were 100 years old. Now I will try to share the screen and show you the video. We will see whether it works. I will play the first example. You should be able to see the puppets, the old puppets. Well, tell me if it works or whether it gets stuck. Now it's working well. Thank you. So this is the first meeting of Domina and Helena. So this was the first example. I will stop it now. Now I will show you the second example. At the puppet theater, we have a certain advantage compared to a normal drama theater. We can show scenes that cannot be shown at a normal theater. So we are able to show the island where the story is situated. Now I will show you the recording. Please be settled. So I will continue with these examples. I think we are behind the schedule. So I hope we were able to show you how we manufactured in the factory. Now I will show you the female robot. We played with the idea that Čapek has biological robots which are similar to people. And there's also a very technical idea of robots that are made from metal and have screws. So we thought that a robot that is not dressed looks like a robot, and when she's dressed, she looks like a human being. I will show you that. So this is our female robot, Sola. And we very much simplified the characters and also the story. And now I would like to show you two more examples. We combine puppet plays and also a stylized play. Maybe you can recall the following situation. One of the characters dies as a result of an electric shock, and I will show you how we decided to interpret this scene. Hopefully you will be able to see it well. This scene is very long. I will not play it in full. And now I would like to conclude. In spite of the fact that we make fun about it, we make various references, we work with nonsense, and this is something that Čapek did not envisage. So in spite of that, we do have respect to Čapek and his work. What Bára Kudlová talked about yesterday is something that I would like to refer to now. What survived from this play is a certain message in humanism that people should not give up on ideals, on the basics, on what makes us human beings. Now, I will read a sentence that I wrote down for translators. It's a very nice sentence that I cannot recall, that I cannot say by heart, but now I will read down. So, in spite of all the fun, making references, making detours, in the final part, we paid tribute to love and sentiment. And now I will try to show you one of the last scenes. Now I'm getting lost in the time frame. Hopefully, I will be able to find it. These are the characters at the end. The music is crazy. However, I believe that the picture is very poetic. It doesn't make the impression that we are making fun of it. We are really taking it seriously. I believe that at the theater, in reality, it will be visible. So this was it. It will be a secret what will be born out of the female robot. This was it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the other speeches. Thank you.
Já ještě tady na vysvětlenou posluchačům, kteří se ptali v chatu, řeknu, že jsme zvuk
Thank you
nesdíleli.
so much. Just an information piece I would like to share is we have not shared this tone, the sound, because the sound was rather difficult, but we will be able to see the performance in the theater after the lockdown is finished. And of course, now you saw the streamed version without the sound, because the sound was problematic in the streaming. Now we will move from Prague to Pilsen, to the Josef Kajetan Tyl Theatre, and let me welcome Vladimir Čepek, the dramaturg, part of the creative team who focused on RUR some time ago. Tell me, you had a premiere of RUR on October 26, 2019, if my information based on the Theatre Institute database correct. This anniversary of 100 years of RUR has been taken into account also, I suppose. The floor is yours. Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can we hear each other? Well, as for the anniversary, it didn't have to do with the anniversary. It was rather a chance. I knew back in 2019 that in a couple of years there will be this major anniversary, but back then we knew we wanted to stage Čapek's plays. However, we wanted to have Petr Prokot here. Unfortunately, he couldn't participate. Then I will actually say a few words about his take on the performance. However, we had Lukáš Kuchinka as the stage designer, and we also had Lucia Sperlova cooperating with us, and Andrzej Schwanderlik, who actually provided music, and I as the dramaturg, and the director was Philip Nichols. Our theatre is located in Pilsen, and I have to say that the bread and mortar of our theatre is to stage classical dramatic pieces. And that is why we focused on Čapek's repertoire at the beginning of our season back in 2019. What was interesting was that we focused on his brother, the previous season, that was Josef Čapek, and his short story. Now we started working on Karel Čapek's plays, dramatic pieces, and started thinking about which ones would be the most suitable. And we actually touched upon RUR and the Macropolis affair. It is somewhat ironic that we first decided on the Macropolis affair. However, then we changed our mind and switched to RUR. What was the reason? Well, we thought that the Macropolis affair was more dramatic, the language was more interesting. However, since in our Pilsen theatre, we have 4 companies, one of whose is the dramatic company, and since the opera company already staged Macropolis plays, we finally decided to prepare the other piece by Čapek, namely RUR. I have to say that we premiered in October 2019, and we still have it in our repertoire. And if we will be able to actually open the doors of our theatre, you will be able to see it. So what was actually the most attractive moment for us to actually stage RUR? It was the topic when humanity relies on the labor of AI, and then it is at the expense of humanity. It describes the current situation when we actually have AI everywhere, and shortly after the outbreak of the pandemic, we thought for a moment that the world will be reflecting upon the current development, technological development, that we will, as humanity, be thinking about the meaning, but we see that it unfortunately was just a short glimmer of hope. This described development has to do with technologies. My previous speaker was speaking about AI already, about its features, about its capacity to do things for us. And it is true, because technologies we did not think of existing 10 years ago, we now use daily, on a daily basis. Could you imagine 20 or 30 years ago that we would be able to communicate with each other live over a digital platform? Let me quote our director, Philip Nichols, who, when preparing this performance, said the following: "After all, already in the revelation of St. John in the Apocalypse, it is said that at the end of the ages, only those who wear the mark of the beast can buy and sell." And of course, this is what we have now. We have various applications, we have the internet, we have payment cards, and this is actually the self-fulfilling prophecy. We know how deep learning is carried out. We have heard many things. Now I would like to quote an analyst, Honza Till, who works with neural networks in AI. I tried to give this deep neural network a book of quotes by famous personalities, and AI tried to generate its own quote. This quote reads as follows: "People are low and rotten. Only man does not understand two theses, and that is that if Trotsky fails, ownership will also fail." That was back in 2018, ladies and gentlemen. The Shvanda Theater proved that this development has advanced further. This is just to show you what military industry could use. And this is what Čapek describes. Years ago, many things are still applicable. Many things are timeless. His text carries some imperfections for today's staging. Well, Milan Bečka had to overcome those challenges. And I will, ladies and gentlemen, now quote our director, Philip Nichols, who actually described imperfections or challenges. The quote: "I am convinced that Karel Čapek was a skeptical visionary at the beginning of the technological boom of the early 20th century. Unfortunately, every visionary works with the reality that surrounds him. Only exceptional individuals in human history could imagine the logical metamorphosis of their reality, such as Hawking and his reflections on extraterrestrial civilization. Therefore, if we read RUR, only technically, we can easily get a picture of Karel Čapek as a watermark naive and his RUR like a smiling to outdated alarming story. However, if we read RUR in depth and we imagine the limits of the knowledge of that time that Čapek was facing, then he is fascinated by the constant modernity and timelessness of the alarm. And suddenly we can see Čapek as a philanthropic visionary who would certainly not lose his breath.
A asi je patrné ze slov pana režiséra, že jsme se nechtěli vydat směrem k nějaké muzejní inscenaci, která by nám ukazovala, jak to Čapek zamýšlel v tom roce 1921. Ale k nějakému modernímu pojetí, které by snad rezonovalo s dnešní dobou. A k tomuhle nám mohly posloužit různé inspirační zdroje, o které jsme se opírali a které nám ukázaly cestu, po které se
in debate 10, which would show us which path to go. And let me mention two inspiration sources, and that would be the Big Bang Theory TV show, and Westworld. I will try to show you some pictures. Hang on, I'll try to share my screen. Can you see the pictures? Here, this is a poster, and this here is another picture. Well, our thinking was that the RUR characters should be, at least in the prologue, very young scholars, with the exception of Alquist. They wanted to have fun, they wanted to have various things, but then when we see those characters and when we see Helena Glory as the daughter of a financier who lives in a golden cage, then it is more logical for us. Why, when she, Helena Glory, meets a young man, then she gets carried away, she falls in love, and that the other man fall in love with her. And this was another inspiration source for us, those sets, those scenes, which could actually be perceived as way too naive. But with time, in this very context, it will start working. I also mentioned another show, Westworld, that gave us inspiration for the set design, mainly for the visual side of the theater architecture and for the costumes, which we wanted to see as a rather eclectic mix of various styles rather than the science fiction uniforms. This is the visual concept of our roboters, and we actually presented them, or rather in the past they were presented as mechanical beings. However, Čapek himself writes about the robots as about humanoids who would be very similar to people. Let me mention the last factor, and that is the text itself. For adapting RUR to date, it was very necessary to do some text editing, where we would actually swap outdated words, which were reminiscent of the first half of the 20th century. And I'm not speaking only about cable, telegraph, or telegram, but also other words. We also had to edit spots in the text which had to do with artificial intelligence and the urge to look for the so-called magical substance for their reproduction. Now, I would say that the technological advancement is so advanced that it would be artificial intelligence itself to discover the magical substance, and that led us to the decision to strike out this scene, which is part of the second act. However, he wanted to be true to the Chapek's play, and that's why we actually focused on the hope with which Karel Čapek described the emergence of love between the robotess Helen and the robot Primus as the germinating seed of hope. And that is the hope with which Karel Čapek and we today look to the future. And that is about all from me.
Děkujeme. Zatímco budeš, Vladimíre, zavírat, tak moc děkujeme za tvůj příspěvek. Zůstaň s námi.
Thank you, Vladimír. Stay here, please. And now I will switch into the other language. I hope I'm not going to become a robot myself or robotess myself.
Who will establish a bridge from RUR to the White Plague, because she's a person who introduced for the first time these two plays into a Portuguese context. So we are very curious. What will you tell us about your interpretation of the plays in the Teatro Estudio Fonte Nova? I think that I should mention yet that you are also representing the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Nova University, and maybe some hint which will explain why you chose the Czech author for your theater production. Is the fact that in your biography, I found that you spent one semester at the Palacký University in Olomouc. So maybe this can be some trace how you came to the idea to stage a Czech author, but maybe I'm wrong. So Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I will contextualize a little bit this connection as well. So everybody is seeing and listening well? So, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Arts and Theatre Institute for welcoming this presentation, as well as the partners involved and fellow colleagues. I have really appreciated all your presentations yesterday and today. So my name is Patricia Paixão, and the reason I am here, like we're contextualizing before, in the connection with CHAPIC is not only related to my work with the performing arts. I'm a producer, creator, and actress for the Portuguese company Teatro Studio Fonte Nova, which is located in Setúbal, more or less 45 kilometers from Lisbon. But I have also studied in the Czech Republic in the past, as it was mentioned, developing a master degree in Euroculture, part of the Erasmus Mundus program, and was an intern through the Leonardo da Vinci program for Iniciativa Pro Alto, an NGO based in Prague, which actually Teresa, which was here yesterday, was a part of. So my interest towards Czech language, which I continue to study in Czech culture, never ceased. In my second MA on performing arts, I recently wrote a paper on RUR and the other bodies of significance, relating it to hybridism in performance. But today I will tell you about the more recent experiences of the company I work for with CHAPIC, specifically with RUR and the White Plague and how it all started. In 2017, the company I work for, in part of the direction, developed a one-year workshop with theater apprentices where we decided to prepare RUR for a final presentation. The experience was so challenging and exciting that we proposed to work on the show as part of our own program for 2018-2019, supported by the Portuguese government, General Directorate of the Arts, and Setúbal's municipality. The premiere and its presentations were booked for October 2019, and I will describe some of the challenges and particularities of this staging. The first challenge was the text, which suffered some dramaturgical cuts, including one character, Fabri, which some sentences were morphed into Allmeyer's character, and some of the robots. Nevertheless, the main events of the play remain, as well as the division of the play in its introductory act and 3 following acts. The show ran for almost 2 hours and a half with no breaks, with what we felt was a good reception from the audience. The amount of characters in RUR for a 21st century small theater company was actually one of the challenges. So the decision already mentioned before regarding actors' roles was not the only one. The actors had to unfold themselves from the humans to the robots in the last act, and as it has been common, the actors that played Domen and Helena transformed into Robert Primus and Elena, and Robot Elena at the end. The only actor that had only one part was Alquist. So here you can see our poster from the play with the sentence, "What will the robots do next?" And this was designed by, the author was the same as the set designer, José Manuel Castanheira, which I will approach briefly soon. So the book, the challenges of translation of RUR into Portuguese from Czech in English could give a whole presentation. But let's just say that the fact that the text was written 100 years ago, while sometimes using particularly idiomatic expressions, was an adventure itself. Fortunately, the book was published by a strong Portuguese independent publisher, Não Edições, and got a major highlight in one of Portugal's main newspapers, Expresso, as we see on the right, giving it a 4-star review. Worth mentioning that there had only been a previous publishing of the text in the 60s in a collection alongside other science fiction texts. In terms of particularities, there are 3 which I would like to address and seems to stand out regarding other RUR enactments. Although the choice of direction by José Maria Dias was mostly naturalistic, no special technology or reference to a hyper-developed society is used, there are some details that went a little far from what could be traditional choices. One of them was the choice to cast a Black actress, Cirila Bossuet, for the role of Helena. And for some reason, her vindicating rhetoric and arguments at the beginning of the introductory act seemed to have another weight and meaning. It is undeniable the relevance of this female character to the plot, and the analysis of Helena and the later robot Elena in the story would be worth deepening in maybe another presentation. Since in this direction there is no reference of a specific year, although we could guess a time frame from its costume, props, and set design that could be somewhere in the 20th century time frame, This woman could be defending both the robots' rights in her own at the beginning of the 20th century or in our own. Moving on, another feature was the set design. The Portuguese architect, professor, and scenographer José Manuel Castanheira, also a former jury of Prague Quadriennale in 1995, developed this idea to create the environment of a circus tent, as we see here in the picture. Although it seemed quite absurd at first, the question, where did the circus relate to any of this, arose to all of us. We could mention that both could relate to the world of fantastic, of other possibilities, of possible monsters or hybrids. But also that in this intrinsic political game, RUR also describes the circus of decision-making that occurs day by day in our own governments, in the arguments in any parliament, or inside the plot twists of any political party. In a way, the costume designers Zenova tried to go after this idea and subtly followed the hints. Helena at the beginning with her leopard coat, was she going to attack? Or is Helena herself endangered in some way by 6 men that surrounded her? The fact is that from the introductory act to Act 2 and 3, Helena still wore a jacket in comparison to the dress she is originally wore on the text. But this time, the leopard print only remained on the jacket collars, as we see on the second picture. Other details worth mentioning: the bright red on Domin's jacket, that could well be the presenter of this circus, the signifier of power and visibility. Bosman's vest was inspired by the play's description of the character as a Jewish one, as a stereotypical image in common role. Čapek relates the commercial or marketing responsible that knows all about the accountancy of the company to a Jewish character. Unfortunately, Čapek would not see the full horrors of the Holocaust in its deaths in concentration camps, although a glimpse would be predictable, where our costume designer also took inspiration for the stripes of his vest, where we see in the middle, on the second picture. Finally, all the robots which had significant roles wore blue vests, while the robot masses that interpreted the revolution wore blue and green long-sleeve jumpsuits representing blue-collar workers. One last particularity regarding this enactment, this Portuguese enactment, and also an appropriation, was a choice, a Portuguese appropriation, was a choice to use a choir for 3 particular scenes, the choir that we see on the first picture. And with that, we introduced lyrics that were not obviously in the original text. For the direction of this choir, the Czech maestra Markéta Humova was invited, with composition of the music by André Mota. The choir was made by volunteers and performing arts interns, but essentially what it created, among other sensations, were 2 layers of meaning. The first, the robots' attack at the end of Act 1, signaled by what was thought to be the factory siren for noon. The song was entitled Roboti of der Mundo and was written in 4 languages, English, German, Portuguese, and Czech, with 4 groups singing different parts of the lyrics with different tempos. The international sense of this revolution was given by this anthem, where we hear words like reason, brotherhood, or work in each of the languages mentioned. At the end, the robots distributed the flyers with the text we can see on the presentation, second image. The other song that appeared, and that is an example, which appeared at the end of Act 2, and again at the end of the play, could have been a Portuguese sense of appropriation. The lyrics were taken from the poet Because the People Tell the Truth, written by the Portuguese poet António Fernandes Aleixo, who lived from 1899 to 1949. And the music was entitled An Anthem for Rebellion. At the end of Act 2, the robots would invade the stage. And before thinking Alquist and Radius making the way into his speech, we would hear them sing. And this is a free translation to English, and I quote, "It comes near the end of the whim of this false nobility, twin sister of the sloth, more disgusting than trash. Already the slave is convinced to fight for its sprawl here with a sense of proletariat. He already knows it belongs to him, a place in the sun in this world. Show him your modern knowledge that took a lifetime stuck in that mousetrap that exists between heaven and hell." So this was my taken journey into RUR in Portuguese, and now I will move on to Bilanemots. In the spring of 2020, Portugal saw the rise of the pandemic. And as with other cases, the country went into state of emergency in mid-March. The company was 2 weeks from premiering a show that we were going to premiere also now. It was the same show when we went into state of emergency again. So I don't know why we are getting stuck in this Ouroboros. And obviously the situation was new to everyone. Apart from all 9 talks, some pre-recorded shows that we made available and some other content created in video for online purposes only, I started having the feeling that this wasn't enough. So for some reason, knowing the plot as we do, the white plague came to my mind. And in mid-April, we started gathering a cast. It started with me, my other colleague from Teatro Studio Fonte Nova, actor and director Eduardo Dias, with whom I translated the text into Portuguese, and the Czech writer, director, and actress Anna Lunyakova. The 3 of us gave shape to the dramaturgy of the performance. It was clear we wanted to create an international stance. So the cast was pretty diverse. Dr. Sigilius was played by Eduardo, the Marshal was played by me, a Portuguese. Anna played the constant journalist that came into scene, sometimes using Czech. Lupe Leal, a Brazilian actor and director living in Brazil, played Dr. Galan. Inês Adan, a Spanish actress and director living in Canada, played the mother. Carlos Pereira, a Portuguese actor, played the father. And finally, the Baron was played by the Portuguese actor, Fábio Nóbrega Vaz. And so, doença branca, Bilanemots, enfermedade blanca, yes, we call it disease, Asan, as we call it, was born. A sort of synopsis manifesto was created that went as follows. No, it wasn't in our plans, but there was a desire to do something, to create, to unite, to share, as well as to bring a little more sustainability, a drop, for those who have a little less. And there he was, as always, our Chapek, looking back at us and answering us from a distance of almost a century. We will premiere this challenge with love, joy, commitment, reflection, and criticism, physically distant, but very close to each other in our hearts. In this enactment of excerpts from the White Plague, we bring together interpreters from different locations and origins. Just as the pandemic is general and global, so is this enactment. Just as we are advised social distance, we will execute the physical one. Just as topic exposed war and conflict, and possibly even the weaknesses of a healthcare system, so will we. We do not know if it is theater, if it is performance, if it is media art. It is an expression, a manifestation, a reconnection to create. The performance, which ran for approximately 1 hour, premiered on the 23rd of May 2020 with a live streaming from Zoom to Facebook in a co-production with Casa da Cultura, Culture House, a venue run by Setúbal's municipality. And in 2 sessions, we had nearly 3,000 views. Some live views, then other people saw the performance afterwards, with comments from around the globe, which for a small production left us quite satisfied. In terms of dramaturgic options and options of co-creation, there are some which are worth mentioning. We all played with the idea that each character was in their own house and with the possibilities this could offer us, as rudimentary as this could be. The start of the performance showed each of us preparing for getting in a role. The first picture is from that start. Would it be by changing our personal names to the character ones on Zoom, putting our masks on, or simply getting dressed? The idea of being on Zoom also helped to interact with the windows. Some characters would appear just showing a piece of news, which could be relevant. We all showed pieces of news that related to the pandemics in our country somehow. As we see in the second picture, there is a piece of Spanish news that says something like the coronavirus puts proof into a system, into a healthcare system punished by years of cuts. So there were news for health systems, from our economy, and even the reaction of politicians. At a certain point, a sort of chorus was created, where every time the word pandemics was referred, all characters would show up on screen, and we would look for the white spot in our bodies. Each of us also played with technology and technicalities as we could. For example, filters were used to change the lighting. As we see in the first picture, we would put a filter in front of our cameras. So, just a second. What was the white plague for us? As with the text, each character profits from the disease. And in this sense, we wanted to reflect how it could be symbolically affect each of the characters differently. Marshall, for example, develops a spot on her face. He was transformed into a she, which was actually me, with a $1 in euro sign. All the performance followed a more humorous and absurd stance from the start. And although it is true that Čapek mentioned that, and I quote, "I stand up for everyone. Perhaps that is why I write comedies instead of dramas," calling his work a comedy of truth, it is also a fact that our collective felt that if we approach this topic at a time with this heaviness, it is showed in the text, it might put the audience even more to an off mood. So although playing very little with the text, we had fun with each of our intentions in direction. The absurdity and nonsense was present from beginning to end. Would it be on a childish baron that was almost afraid to ask a question? A Marshall that is only seen from the neck down. We don't see her head all the time, only at the end. And he sings, or she, me, sings an excerpt of "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" at the balcony at a certain part of the performance. Or on the sexist father that follows populist news and a compassionate and submissive mother that finally, when she passes away, changes her name on screen to Dead Mother, that are seen from the kitchen to the bedroom, as we see on the picture, the first picture. So finally, at the end, Galen's death remains. We maintain Galen's death. But at this time, he is bashed online, where all the characters transformed into Citizen 1, 2, 3, and 4, screaming words of protest like, "We want bankers and puppeteers," or "Marshall is our voice." The last words of Galen, while he lies on the floor, remained, "I could have saved you all." To conclude this journey of Čapek in Portugal, it is worth mentioning that it was the first time a professional Portuguese theatre company staged the author. Some reasons might be pointed out why Čapek is missing in Portugal. The lack of relation and awareness towards authors from Central Europe, the length of the plays and number of characters, or even the themes that could, fortunately or not, unfortunately, be now more present than ever. My effective relation with Czech culture allowed it to be a driver for this discovery and experiment, but also the growth of exchanges with countries, programs like Erasmus or underfunds or scholarships that allow interculturality and disciplinary crossings. However, the dialogue of Čapek in Portugal could and should continue. It is worth mentioning that the author and director Irgi, or Jorge, as he later adapted in Portugal, Listopad, left a legacy in Portugal, where this relationship was kept alive, with our national theatre presenting works such as Havel's or even Schweik, and disseminating other Czech authors into academic theatre. Above all, in a time where authoritarian regimes are on the rise, especially taking opportunity of yet another crisis, it's the humanitarian aspect of Čapek's work that is valuable to disseminate. So, thank you. Děkuji, thank you, hvala lepa, danke, obrigada.
Many thanks, Patricia. It was brilliant connection to Czech culture and also for a call for international collaboration, which is under huge pressure.
Děkuji, Patricie. Toto bylo skvělé. A bylo to velice.
Okay, so I guess that there will be many questions also to your contribution and intervention in our conference. But now we have yet two stagings of the White Plague in front of us. The first one, which will be presented, was produced by the City Theatre Zlín. We have here with us two members of the team, and again I will switch into Czech, so please turn on your interpretation into English. Takže já tady vítám dramaturgy ze Zlínského.
Well, let me welcome the dramaturge from Zlín, Ms. Kašparková, the dramaturge Vladimír Fekar from Zlín, from the theater in Zlín, who both will be speaking about how they worked with the text. In Zlín, you might have already read that they created a podcast of the White Plague. Hello, good morning. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you so much. We are sending our best from Zlín. And let me describe the situation. How come that the White Plague became a part of a special project which we have come up with in Zlín in response to the pandemic in November 2020, when we had a situation where we could not run any rehearsals on stage, although some would have been possible. But of course, we tried to actually focus on the new project involving the podcast production. And we actually broadcast 7 days a week. And that was during November and December 2020. You can actually read more information on www.hladovykasparek.com. This name, this title in Czech, Hladový Kašparek, that's the hungry gesture in English. And we actually came up with this title inspired by the notorious comment of our populist president who said that hungry artist is the best artist in the pandemic, when artists did not have any source of income. And then, of course, there was another source of inspiration for us, and that was the bar, our theater bar with the name Gesture Bar, where artists would gather and exchange liberal ideas. However, I will speak about the dramaturgical decision for staging, or rather producing, the podcast. We decided that we should actually produce Czech classical texts and make them attractive again. And of course, the White Plague during the pandemic was the best offer. And then we also focused on Victor Dick's play titled The Great Magician. We could come with the audio production because we already worked on an audio radio play, rather, by another author, and that production was very successful. It actually got very good response from our audiences. So it proved successful, and that was another reason why we decided to come up with the project. Why did we choose the white plague? We thought that the white plague audio would be very rare because the last audio, or rather radio production weapon in 1980. 1982, more precisely, there was a record audio version of the white plague. And that's why we saw a great potential for us in terms of being successful. There was a previous, actually, audio version in 1938, which is not existent anymore. And then there were other versions of an audio. Since the pandemic is still here, it is only logical, or it was only logical, to actually come up with the audio version. And when the pandemic broke out, the white plague by Čapek was mentioned very frequently, also quoted. And that's why we thought it was only natural. Čapek's plays are timeless and also topical in our opinion. And before the pandemic broke out, we knew about it, but we didn't feel any urgency to come up with a text. With the outbreak of the pandemic, we saw the conditions for working with his work as a very lucky situation. Of course, there is the virus coming from China, something that Čapek already mentioned in the White Plague. In this regard, his text is regarded as a visionary text. Karel Čapek also experienced the Spanish flu in 1918 to 1920. And he knew and had experienced such a pandemic. We knew, based on documentary evidence, that people had to wear masks and that they had to socially distance and that they actually behaved in a very similar way to the current pandemic situation. So we saw that he described his own experience with the pandemic. The ideas described or mentioned in the White Plague also resonate with social media. And also what I can mention is that the older ones should make way for the young ones. Petrik Jančarič, the director of the performance, is saying many of us have felt the spirit of Dr. Galen and started to thinking that the whole society will change. But now we are getting sober and are seeing our rough politicians who are doing monkey business, I would say, something that is not humanitarian and no good for people. This is the current situation during the pandemic. And this is a political background that also defines the world as it is. The pandemic that shows the focus on one's career. And this is how we actually tried to produce the play. Well, we also selected the cast, which is out of the ordinary in this very play. As Katarina has said, the play is timeless. At the same time, we actually could feel a feature of it being archaic, a little bit outdated. Although its translation could be more modern, but since we are working with Čapek's works, we actually try to honor his own language, which is a bit archaic. In our case, we actually saw the play as a game of arguments. And this limited us a bit when the decision was made. Patrick Lančarič was saying, what I had a problem with was the masculine, purely masculine world, which sees a woman only as a mother, daughter, or helper. And this is archaic that makes it less timeless. If comparing Čapek's plays with our interpretation is that we see women who can actually work in various positions within the administration or other spheres. In other words, we actually worked with women or female characters who are different in fulfilling their roles. This was our different approach, and in doing so, the play changed dramatically because the emotional worlds of women and men have changed, and to the better, I would say, I would argue. And I would say that the 70 years that went by since Čapek wrote it, the society has developed so much, and women have got very many leading positions, be it in public administration or in the healthcare sector, and that is why it was an advantage for the play. Well, that was the thing, because that was an archaic feature of it. And that's why we decided to cast a woman as Dr. Galen. We needed to test it first, this revolutionary idea. And then when we tested it, we came to the conclusion that it shouldn't be to the detriment of the text, that we could do it. And we saw that it made it more interesting, rather. Then we understood that if we only have Dr. Galen as a woman, then it would be not a balance, gender balance. And that's why we decided to have another female character, Dr. Sigeli. And then we needed to do it throughout the whole play. That means that we have got women, we cast women throughout the whole sociological spectrum. We have the Minister of Health, and then the journalist and one of the lepers as women. That means that we only cast or adapted the male characters to female characters. And that was it. Yes. Dr. Sigelius could well, we were actually working very gently with the text, I have to say, in terms of speech editing. I have to say we didn't need to edit the text much. We looked to change the word Dr. Childish, which we swapped for Dr. Naive to make it more current, to make it more apparent, clearer. So those were details just. Then how to use voices. Of course, there are voices of the lepers at the beginning, and the marshal also speaks at the beginning, and you cannot identify him as such. And it's not by chance, that was our intention. Let me give you some random examples. You will be, when listening to the audio play, you will, of course, be thinking about the dialogues. There is the opening dialogue between Professor Sigelius and Dr. Galen. And there is some special tension because on the one hand, you have the career-focused woman, Dr. Sigelius, who has this very leading position. And on the other hand, you have Dr. Galen, and we could say that this is the representative of the good, but we have more shades to the picture. And then there is another dialogue between Dr. Galen and the marshal. We didn't want to make the marshal in a grotesque way, or we didn't want the marshal to see Dr. Galen as a potential object of his interest. That is just for your information. We were working with a number of impulses for the actors. There are also the characters of the assistants when speaking to Dr. Galen and to Dr. Sigelius. We didn't want to actually interpret the play in a gender way, but there is this potential to
důraz. To, že ta hra vlastně je o životě a smrti, to, že vlastně v těch dvou klíčových rolích jsou matky, potenciální matky, taky to dává nějakou jinou informaci.
Honest and about the fact that the women there are also mothers. And the concluding motive towards the end, where Dr. Galen is tramped down to death, we have to realize that Dr. Galen is a woman in our play, and it actually shows something about society which tramples a woman to death. Yes, it is different, especially when a woman actually does something. Dr. Galen is not victorious, but the others, because they persevere and because they fear for life, that is something that is very pessimistic, because the outcome is that Dr. Galen dies in the mob and war is approaching. On the other hand, let's say that the White Plague is not a play about feminism for us. We had both men and women. They were actually the same partners. They were there, written, described already by the author. It was not our intention to make it somehow gender focused. However, you could see something that came out of it. Let me describe how we actually developed the play, because we worked on it during the pandemic, and because we didn't want to actually rehearse in the theater and infect each other, we had to abide by the sanitary measures. And I have to say, we had individual rehearsals when the director only could hear the voice of the actor. And I will quote Patrick, how he described the situations. Each character had to be cast individually, and then in post-production we had to put the dialogues together and also work with the rhythm. It required very detailed preparation for both the actress and me as a director. I had to lead the actors very precisely. As a director, together with the sound master, we all had a mask. That won't surprise you, because we all wear masks. An interesting thing or comment was that the marshal was the least dangerous person, or Zdeněk Jurina, because he had already had COVID-19. I know that you must have been put through such situation yourselves. However, it is a fact that we actually could experience it by ourselves when preparing for Čapek's White Plague, and that it was something difficult to describe. What I think is that during the pandemic, when working on the White Plague, we could somehow support each other, because that was a project that made some sense for us. And we actually discovered the possibility of another take on our potential. That's it. Oh, thank you so much. And I hope that you also keep distance with each other or between each other. And let me say, Vladimir, the thing that Zlín Theatre was the first in the Czech Republic that initiated the sewing of masks in the Czech Republic. You pioneered the project of making homemade masks, and that was a great thing. And as for Professor Sigelius, what we know is that we have such a position in the current public administration. So it is not outdated as a function. And of course, it might be very outdated as a position, but our current legislation actually followed on the previous legislation.
It's my pleasure to welcome in our panel Nicole Metzger. She's joining us from Vienna. And she will tell us something about Austrian interpretation of the White Plague. Nicole is a member of the Theater Spielraum, and she will tell us something about the staged reading, which was prepared last autumn, and which hopefully also will continue to be part of the repertory also in the future. So Nicole, the floor is yours. If you struggle with some English word, please do not hesitate to say it in German, and I will try to help you.
Thank you very much for the discussion. I will need you. And thank you very much for the invitation too. I'm sorry for not speaking Czech, and my English you will see. I have to read my contribution, and it will take about 10 minutes. Theater Spielraum is a small private theater which is modestly subsidized by the city of Vienna. It is dedicated to the pursuit of discovering and rediscovering stage plays or theater projects with specific socio-political content in a respectful and intrigued manner, as it does also with classical texts. Our motto is, we do take literature in the literal sense, meaning that we are committed to the original text. We don't want to overwrite or rewrite or change the original. We see it as a challenge to prove its up-to-dateness in alternative ways. One of our main focuses is the literature of the 1920s and the 1930s. We have staged, for example, plays of Ödön von Horvath, Jura Säufer, Hermann Broch, as well as our own dramatizations of novels written by Robert Musil, Thomas Mann, Stefan Zweig, and Franz Werfel. In light of the current coronavirus pandemic, the thought of Karel Čapek's drama, The White Plague, was quite obvious for us. I would like to pick two aspects of this play which we consider as crucial. First of all, the sense of humor. The content of the so-called drama, consisting of 3 acts and 14 scenes, is serious and grave. Yet there are humorous and satirical vibes throughout the play, which almost strike a bright tune. The characters are all sketched all too human and impish. Our second focus point is the topicality. In the year 1937, the play warns very precisely and predictively of the imminent danger of a world war, which will break out 2 years later. The diagnosed white plague is a metaphor for fascism. People suffer from cold marble spots, macula marmorea, located on various parts of their body, which leaves them numb, literally unable to feel anything at all. As the spots grow bigger, the whole body turns into stone and dies. This is what Dr. Galen is trying to fight, but not only with humanistic ideals. He blackmails the ones in power and demands disarmament and peace, so that all of mankind won't have to turn into stone. Naive? Maybe. Today, the world is threatened by a pandemic which not only metaphorically, but very literally takes our breath away. A Dr. Galen of today could not act any differently. He also would have to demand a complete system change in a naive and blackmailing manner. Our whole world today is also threatened by a climate catastrophe, which is as much a world destruction as a world war. Reconstruction afterwards is currently beyond imagination. So far, so interesting for us as theater artists and producers. But there are a bunch of practical difficulties opposing the concept and the realization for our project, though. Working conditions in autumn 2020 are more difficult than usual. How and how long can we work under SARS-CoV-2 safety precautions? How close and for what period of time are actors allowed to work? For routinely done SARS-CoV-2 tests, the theater has to pay on its own. How to schedule rehearsals under these circumstances. The play is written for a big cast. And what if we are not allowed to play at all? Theaterspielraum does depend on the income of ticket sales. Due to SARS-CoV-2 restrictions, we have to limit our seating for the audience to 35 people. So we cannot risk much. But we want to realize this project at all costs. The sooner, the better. We choose a hybrid form and call it a play reading performance. That is how we are able to reduce the amount of rehearsals. The stage setting is abstract and the scenes, street, hospital, study, home, the doctor's place, are only roughed out. The actors are holding folders with their copy of the script in their hands to maintain the recommended social distancing more easily even during the performance. This special form implies an abstraction that makes, as we hope, some interventions of the dramaturgy better understandable and easier to accept. First, we decide to work with 4 actors and 2 actresses. I will now try to share my... there are, can you see?
Yes.
I hope, yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I hope I can manage to go forward. I don't, just a moment.
Maybe press enter.
No, I would like to do it myself by one, and I don't find the.
Yeah, and I think if you try to press enter, maybe it works. Not with cursor, but enter.
Just sorry for that.
No problem.
Now, perhaps it's okay when it's like that. I can manage like that. It's not the whole screen, I think, but perhaps it's okay like that. We decided to work with 4 actors and 2 actresses. There are Dr. Galen, Martin Purt, who is also in the audience, as I know, listening to us here, and Professor Sigelius, Gunther Matzka. We have to see him. The father, Carsten Rühl, and the mother, Hertha Pachel, in continuous parts. Numerous other parts are performed only by 1 actor, Christian Kohlhofer, and 1 actress, Dana Prötsch. The 2 always appear together as a pair. We have 2 lepers here, 2 journalists, 2 assistant doctors, 2 children, and Consequently, Baron Krug has a baroness by his side. For these two actors, the role changes have to take place so very fast that we can only work with simple symbols. Each of the characters is distinguished by a folder in a different color on which a part of a costume is attached with clothes pegs, costume Anna Pollack. For example, the Baron and the Baroness have fur and toilet paper with banknote prints on their folders. Toilet paper was a very valuable thing and quickly sold out in Austria during the first lockdown. Some other characters, the professors, the adjutants, the general, the public servant, the hospital staff, the marshal's daughter, the young Krug were left out completely. In this concept, a very crucial key part is still missing, the marshal himself. In Čapek's play, even this character is allowed individuality, a private destiny, a family and human conflicts, especially in the third act. These facets seem neglectable for our purpose. We are interested in the charismatic politician who stages himself as a tribune of the people, as a populist leader, which is not far from how many politicians act nowadays. While we are discussing whom we could ask for this important part and how we could stage him in our rough and ready setting, our research leads us to the black and white film, The White Disease, The White Plague, from 1937, directed by Hugo Haas, with Ota Heller as a director of photography, which has been uploaded completely to the video sharing platform YouTube. At this occasion, we want to express our gratitude to the National Film Archive. This impressive transformation into another medium inspires us to integrate specific parts of the film into our production. The Marshal as a character appears only on screen. 4 short mass scenes, in total 8 minutes and 25 seconds, are added to our staging. Zdeněk Štěpánek as the Marshal, giving speeches to the people, visiting the hospital, and Hugo Haas, as you see, as Dr. Galen, as he first and last appears in the film. After the first scene with the lepers on stage, we show the Marshal's first speech on screen and Dr. Galen listening to him in the crowd. Our Dr. Galen on stage takes over. Later, first act, scene 5, the Marshal on screen visits the hospital and Professor Sigelius on stage proudly tells us about it. The scenes Marshal Baron Krug and Marshal Dr. Galen change from dialogue into quotation mark monologue, which means in the second act, scene 5, we see the Marshal as a still frame on the screen, apparently on the phone with our actors on stage. So, these are so far the biggest transformation compared to the original. When Dr. Galen has been called to see the sick Marshal, we show his last film scene where the crowd beats the doctor to death, and in the end, our actor of Dr. Galen lies on stage. In the third act, third scene, after Baron Krug shot himself, we quit the original for good. The actors leave their characters behind and talk about the different finals in the play and the film. They start to play with a globe-shaped balloon representing the Earth. On screen, we see populist leaders of today and watch how they manage or don't manage to lead their people, especially the poor, through the current SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. Naive, maybe, but we are, with reference to Schiller, committed to the theater considered as a moral institution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicole, very much. Danke schön for your lovely presentation. We really enjoyed. And before we start questioning today, I would like just to make a few comments to all of you. And maybe the first, it was Mr. Rosa, but maybe the question should be directed to dramaturgist David Kostiak, which use a robot by a small letter. Yesterday we talked about dots in RUR and the Czech rules. So in the Czech language allowed to write both with the dots and without dots, but Čapek used robot and salamanders. Also in Valka Smloky, in the word with the salamanders, they use both those words with a capital letter. Actually in the salamanders, after they get some of humans part or humans behaving, they start using a block or salamander with a capital letter. So it's the same case with the robot. Já se přepnu do češtiny. Sorry for my English speakers, but they will have translation. Já se přepnu do češtiny, protože...
We will switch to Czech again. I have to apologize to our foreign listeners. We also had a speaker here representing the theater company Pigs and Puppets. I would like to respond to what he said. I would say that Čapek was actually the least a playwright. He was a playwright against his will in 1927. Actually, he stopped writing play dramas, and he said that the White Plague was written on the initiative of the National Theatre. And he didn't mean to write Mother or the White Plague, and he was very fast at writing in general, but when he wrote plays for theater, it took longer. And when we look at all of his manuscripts, then we can say that most changes were made in his plays. For example, had 5 versions. Saying when it comes to plays, we challenge them. He believed that theater is a living organism, and therefore its plays were modified, rewritten. And he also believed that the interpretation of the dramaturge, of the director, plays a major role. Another thing that I need to mention, it was the topic of my master's thesis, why it's the best part. It was written at the theater, at the Vinohrady theater. So he was on stage and he was the director, he was the artistic director, he was the dramaturge as well. And he wrote this play for actors that he knew really well, Štěpánek, Šajkogova, and so on.
There is this minor character, Kristinka, which was played by Olga Scheinflugova, and she wanted to be a great actress, and he saw that in her. And of course, it works for performances for schools. However, Čapek is great, and he admitted that he was not a great playwright. He had a father physician for whom he wanted to write something, but this idea did not come from Čapek himself. It came from Jiří Foustek, who actually wrote only one play in his life, and that was The Work of Life title. And Čapek also admitted that Jiří Foustka, his colleague, he actually gave him this idea. Čapek admitted it. Another comment of mine is that there was a number of the white plague performances in the Czech Republic. In Zlín, there was a very good stage performance. And in 2018 in Skopje, they also had play by Čapek, and since it is on the Balkan, they actually could work with the emotional tension there because it's a Balkan country. Unfortunately, we do not have much time. I would like to give the floor to Martina, my colleague. Oh yes, now we will be able to answer the questions asked here.
Which we received during our panel, I would like to turn the attention of our international guests to a database which is available on the web pages of our institute, of the main organizer of this conference. The Arts and Theatre Institute is a research center. It provides a library of theater literature. It coordinates international collaboration in performing arts and music, but also, and it's one of its important role, it's documentation center of Czech theater, mainly after 1945. And through this tool, which is called virtual study, maybe I can switch into English so that you can see it better. Virtual study, you can look after stagings in Czech theaters. So if your input is RUR, you can see the list of stagings in the Czech Republic, and you can see here also the last stagings, for example, in Pilsen or by Cakes and Puppets company. So that's because we spoke yesterday about the archive of the National Theatre. I wanted to share with you this tool for research about Czech theatre. But now let's get back to the questions. So we have here a question from our yesterday's speaker, Azim. For both speakers, so it was addressed to Mr. Rosa mainly. How do you think artificial intelligence is going to affect the existential future of the playwright? David Košťák gave his opinion in some way in his speech, but maybe we have many dramaturgs here, so any of you can give his or her opinion.
So from my part, I would just say that we believe kind of in the cooperation of the artificial intelligence and the humans. So we believe that actually the artificial intelligence can make the human authors more productive or more inventive. It can suggest new ideas or help you when you're stuck at some point at the text and you don't know how to continue. So it will suggest some continuations. So this is mainly what is our view of using artificial intelligence in this way.
Vladimír Čepek?
Well, I think it won't.
Můžeš mluvit česky.
Yeah, dobře. Je mi to jedno celkem.
You can speak Czech. I don't mind either language. I hope that it won't be much affliction. I do think that it will be interesting, the mere possibility to cooperate with AI, but I hope firmly that AI won't be able to replace us. Okay, any other question or comment?
No? Okay, so we have here another question. I would like to ask Rudolf if he can explain a little better how the artificial intelligence prioritizes or associates the dialogues to create what it creates. What is the process to have the result that we saw?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's kind of a broad question. It can be answered in many ways. So it depends on what we want to focus on. So I will just draft some main points, and then maybe you can ask what is the thing that you find most interesting. So the system itself, it's an artificial neural network. So in some sense, it is actually simple. It just takes the texts that exist and tries to understand the connections, like if these words were used, then the other words were used, and it has several layers. So when we analyze it, we can see that it has some kind of language understanding. It does understand morphology of the language, the grammar of the language, and we are actually part of our research, not on this project, but on another project, is to understand how much it understands the meaning of the text. And it seems that it can understand some kind of shallow meaning of the text. So the meanings of the words, the meanings of the sentences. It doesn't seem to understand some deeper things behind the text, which actually is very important in theater. And we can see that it works with the words. So it has some relations to the words that were said, but it, for example, cannot understand that there is something going on the scene, and that it would kind of react to some visual prompts that it doesn't have. So this doesn't happen. So it doesn't have this kind of imagination we have with the text, it just works with the text. And technically for actually forcing it to write dialogues and not some other text. So then the model itself, it catches up on what the input looks like. So if the input looks like a dialogue, so it continues as a dialogue usually, but it did learn from other texts where sometimes there is a dialogue and then it goes on to something else. So sometimes this happens in the generation that suddenly decides now it's a good place for a long monologue, which is not very attractive for a theater play. So we did introduce some forceful changes where we force it to always start each line with a character name so that it generates some lines and not just some long text. So we do have some control over that. So I don't know if I answered what you were interested in, or feel free to ask more.
But it still needs an input, is it?
At the moment, yes. So the way we use it, it needs an input. So our plan actually for the next for the coming year is to also try to generate the input. So this way it would be more kind of hallucinating some potential starts of scenes, and we will see how this goes. So we haven't done this yet, but we've seen this in other works that you just don't give it any input or some random noise, and so the first word is completely random, and then it catches up on the first word it generated and starts to build up something. So so we haven't done this yet, but we plan to.
Okay. There was another question by Patricia. So I will read it, but also return it a little bit to Patricia. Patricia asked Marek Bečka if the streaming of RUR is still available, so we could see it. I would add maybe a more general question to all of you, because somehow theater has had to struggle with online contact with its audiences in the past months. And what's your attitude towards what to show online, what to offer to the audiences via digital platforms, and maybe a special question for Patricia, because you mentioned that you tried also to include light design or use the Zoom application to really explore its possibilities in the way of staging. That was really interesting, this remark. So do you see some possible space for some new developments or new approaches to theater after your experience with Zoom staging? But firstly, let's react Marek Bečka.
Well, thank you very much for your interest, Patricia. Well, we are going to show or stream RUR again 28th of March, but you can try to look at our website. I will write it down after, but it's very difficult for us because we are old-fashioned people. We are freelance. We are still, we hope, not so old in our minds, but it's really difficult for us. And I hate this for teaching. I hate this for communication. But by the way, what happened to us that we have very good best boy for lighting and sound, and he actually he was prepared for this, and we are able just to make just quite professional streaming in our amateur. We are not amateurs, sure, we do it for money, but I mean, what we have, we are freelance people, so we are not professionals in this way. So he was ready, and we are able just to do it in professional way. Somehow we help for some friends, for some colleagues, so we stream not only for us, but for other theaters. But still, I think it's very different, and still, I think it's not really fake, but it's very different. You know about, you are all people from theater space, so you are very welcome to see it. But I would prefer just to invite you for some normal life. I hope in summertime it will come.
I've read, actually I followed your first streaming, and you had some problems with selling the tickets online. Somebody was stalling the platform.
That was really funny because someone hacked the system and just started to sell the tickets for himself. What was, from in one hand, very crazy, and from the other hand was very funny because we are puppet theater, so it's really. But finally it was quite cool because it was like, yeah, we are someone.
Čapek would love to hear it, to write a new novel from his novels from one another hands. Yeah. And yeah, thanks for the information.
Actually, we are going to stream this Sunday, Těsné svině. I'm not able just to translate into English, but by the philosopher Ladislav Klima. It's a really crazy show, and I think it would be possible to somehow to follow it in for English speakers too, because it's very it's not just about text so much. It's about pictures, I think. But anyway, much better just live acting, sure.
Yeah, definitely I recommend. I saw you for the first time in Sarajevo. I didn't know a word of English. It was years ago, and I understand perfectly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I can maybe intervene a little. And thank you, Marek. I really enjoyed it, and I will watch it for sure. And I already shared with a few colleagues the website. So regarding this experience and the online experience versus presence, or not versus, but in parallel, what I believe from this experience and from what we are living is that it allows us to experience, to have new possibilities that we can include. It's not an alternative, it's something we can do in parallel. And what it happens is, for me, it makes sense if it's something done specifically for a context. For example, we experienced with Zoom in all its possibilities. But for example, there is a company in Portugal which is called Teatro Mosca. They also had some creations specifically for online streaming. And the thing is, the more knowledge and the more technological access, like Marek was saying, you have, the better it is. Because the fact is, what happened is they had different cameras, like normal cameras, not your laptops connected to the Zoom. And then you can have different views as well. And you can use the possibility to go into chat rooms and like to explore this possibility. But the fact is, theater exists from human relations. That's why we exist. So we need live audience. This can exist in parallel. It's interesting. Obviously, in the last Prague Quadriennale, they had like a lot of talks dedicated to media and dedicated to how technology interacts. And obviously, this relates a lot also to RUR. But I actually would like to read something from an article which I remembered from an employed negativity. I can put the link later, but this is regarding technology and automata. The precarious status of labor is not a product of the coming revolution of machines, but a byproduct of the stagnation and decline of capital. So this means that sometimes we see the menace in technology and in the rise of robots, but this is not the case. What we should see the menace in is in capitalism, in the state that we are living in. So I just wanted to add this bracket because I think it's very important as well to think politically and economically of what we are going through. I don't know if I answered all the question, but I wanted to add this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You did, Patricia. Actually, thank you for this remark because it was obvious from your speech that you read both the plays in a very political way. And it's also a very interesting interpretation for us. In this regard, I wanted to mention that actually on the European level, the topic of artificial intelligence is not that old as we would maybe expect, because it was mentioned here already that the RUR play was written really 100 years ago, and that we would expect that, of course, we developed a lot in technologies, but maybe in the legislative frame and in respect to a labor market, we are extremely underdeveloped. If you just think about that, it's been only a couple of years when the European Union adopted a strategy of artificial intelligence and has really started to try to dedicate its attention to ethical, legislative, educational, and social economic aspects of coexistence with artificial intelligence. It's maybe very surprising. So, it's also a topic to be discussed in some other conferences, but it's necessary to mention this also in our conference.
I would like just to add, Martina, sorry for interrupting you, that I forget to tell that the first Čapek edition of RUR, comparing to the second, the third one, is changed. So even Čapek changed constantly her plots. That's very important about Čapek's. Nobody talks about it, that he was never satisfied with the theater plot. He always changed it. And what's my general feeling from today, and I'm so thankful for all participants that you moved a bit to a right Čapek genre. I always complain about how Czech people see, unfortunately, Čapek so tragically, especially the case Macropolis, for example. Even Čapek, right after the title, it's a comedy, but I saw just tragedy in the Czech Republic. I think it's the same like a Chekhov when you see Racek, the seagull, and today we hear from Bečka, it's a farce, Fraška. We also from Vladimir Čepka hear a bit they played with the comedy genre. We also hear from Zlin that they a bit say, because it's a thing to say in Czech Republic that why disease has, it's a full of grotesque. It starts with Grotesca. Brothers Čapek loves comedy dell'arte. They love Grotesca. But of course, everybody knows how hard it's to write in this genre. They wanted to write, they tried to write and put lots of comedies in their plots, but of course everybody knows how how difficult that was. So I'm so glad to hear that today you really guys talk about a proper Čapek genre. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe that was my last remark before we go for the lunch break. And maybe I switch into Czech because my question is mainly for Vladimír Fekar. Patricia tady zmínila.
Patricia mentioned the new approaches used by theatre people when working with digital platforms. Let me remind you of a performance by Albert Camus, Plague, The Plague, by the company titled Depressive Children Clamor for Money. And that is something that is very current, very topical, given the pandemic situation. But let me ask this way. The audio podcast produced by the Zlín Theatre Company, what was the reaction of the audiences during the pandemic situation? Were the people not too fearful to listen to The White Plague by Čapek, given the difficulties, everyday difficulties in their pandemic lives, in a situation when they rather look for distractions to overcome the difficult situation? Tell me, did you have any response from them? We cannot hear you, Vladia. Please unmute your mic. Sorry. Okay. We made the decision to work on a podcast, audio podcast, because we wanted to actually do something new. It is a new medium, new means of theatre working. And of course, there are possibilities offered by Spotify or by other Czech podcasts. And I have to say, actually, people got interested. As for the response to The White Plague, well, there have been some response. There has been some response by the audiences. They asked us, the listeners asked us whether we actually edited the text created by Karel Čapek, but of course we said we didn't edit it at all. It was about the Cheng, actually illness, and how the morbus Chengi and how the illness was described. The great magician, the great magus, that is a performance by us that will be interesting for the audience. The audiences are already listening, looking forward to it. And of course, we will broadcast it once a week, which will not give such an intense, immersive experience to our audiences compared to a complex audio podcast. If this is sufficient, I think so. And what I think is that we are actually already expanding the speaking time. And that's why I'd like to thank the participants. And we will be more than happy if you stay with us even in the afternoon. The last part of our conference is titled Days After. And we will be focusing on the white plague and RUR, and namely on the performance design or stage design. Well, let me say that there is something I would like to actually recommend to you. There is a site-specific proposal or concept for the white plague and RUR, and we have actually pictures, and all these designs have been created by our students, so it will be very interesting for everyone. Okay, let's start at 1:15. We will meet in front of our computers. Thank you and see you in a half an hour. Thank you.